on allyship.
You mentioned it to me. That's really exciting.
Yeah, Chronicle did it. The Chronicle agreed to do it. We're doing it like as a journal and all these cool things. We'll talk to you about it later, but it is really...
Oh, I can't wait to hear about it. Yeah. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. And they want to do cards. I don't even know what that means, but they want to do a deck of cards. I have no idea.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So we will talk later. Let's see. Hello from Salinas, California. That's one of my favorite places. Jeez.
I think we are live. We're just going to give it a few more seconds.
Okay,
we're live.
We're live.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining myself and Rosalind Wiseman. We're very excited to be here with you. My name is Jessica Allen. I'm a publisher at Corwin Press, and I am also Rosalind's editor, which is a great privilege. Thank you to Barbara's Bookstore in Chicago, one of our great independents, for hosting us. We are thrilled to be here to talk to you more about this book and this work. Just before I start, a few housekeeping issues. There will be a button at the bottom of your screen to get a copy of the book. It's 10% off, so please use that to order the book. We know it's going to be a huge help to you. And also, I will not be monitoring the chat. I encourage everyone to chat amongst themselves, but if you have any questions for Rosalind, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. Don't put it in the chat because I won't have time to look at that. I'll be too engaged in our conversation. With that, I'd like to introduce Rosalind. We've had about a 5-year relationship, and it's been wonderful. She is one of my favorite people. Many of you know her as an author of the bestselling Queen Bees and Wannabes. That became a movie and a Broadway musical. I know her as an education expert and as the author of the co-author of the book that we will be talking about today, which is the Distance Learning Playbook for Parents. I'm sorry that's probably backwards on your screen.
Backwards.
There you go. Rosalind, she's, besides being a best-selling author, she is also the co-founder of Cultures of Dignity, which is a fantastic organization dedicated to the well-being of students and children, particularly adolescents. So that will come into play as she talks a little bit more about the book. This book became an instant bestseller. We are really excited about it. What it really does is talk about how to make your children successful, not only academically, but also socially and emotionally. And we know that those issues are top of mind for everyone in these days, 2020, and continuing on to 2021. So with that, Rosalind, I'm going to ask you, tell us a little bit about how you came to write this book.
Okay, and I want to say hi to everybody because there's so many people from all over. I'm looking at the chat and I'm like, oh my gosh, like people from all over. And I also just have to second Jessica's comment about Barbara's Bookstore, because for as long as I've been writing, which was it's pretty much a long time ago, Barbara's has always been incredibly supportive of my work, and I am so deeply, deeply grateful for the partnership. So it just feels, even though it's from my living room, my office in Boulder, Colorado, that I'm with you all, and I will be with you all again. And it's just a wonderful thing to be able to do this with Jessica and to be able to do this with Barbara's Bookstore. So how did I go about getting to having this book happen? So it's really funny that the person who started this is actually on the call on this meeting with me, because it was actually, I'm not joking, the 23rd of July on a Thursday at approximately 8:30 in the morning when I opened my email for the day, and there was this email, and it was from Jessica, and and then there was a follow-up from another editor at Corwin saying, we have written this book over the summer called the Distance Learning Playbook, but it's for teachers. We want to do it for parents, and we would very much like you to be a part of it and for you to focus on the social emotional wellness part of the book and the learning part of the book. It's just, the only thing is, if you're going to do this, it has to be done in about 4 weeks. And then we're going to publish this book like 6 weeks after that. And I thought, wow, publishing has really changed in the land of COVID and quarantine. But I also thought, in all seriousness, I thought, well, I have to do this. I have to put everything to the side and I have to do this because I've always tried so hard to be able to give young people and parents and the people who care about young people the best resources possible to help navigate us through tumultuous times, even in the best of times. And so it really felt like I just had no choice. And it was a privilege to be able to do it. And then I got to join. It wasn't I was doing it by myself. I was doing it with 3 other co-authors who are just hugely giants in the field of academics. So John Hattie, whose title in Australia is like Teacher Emperor Emeritus of Australia. And then there's Doug Fisher, who's wonderful, and Nancy Frey from San Diego, who are wonderful, wonderful teachers of teachers. So I got to work with them incredibly fast overnight in this partnership that we all just worked really hard. And it was out about 6 weeks later. 6 weeks after we finished it, maybe 4 weeks, I think, it was out. So it was just our attempt to be able to give our best wisdom and our collective wisdom to parents of like, what did you need to know? What were the most important things that you needed to know when it was so easy to feel overwhelmed? And so that is the origin story of the Distance Learning Playbook for parents.
And I just want to say thank you. You know, we identified a need, obviously, that came about so quickly and no one was prepared. And so the first need as an educational publisher was for the teachers. You know, they were thrown into it in March. Nobody had prepared for it. And because it really filled that need, all of a sudden it was like, well, parents need that too. I mean, they're on the other side of it and they didn't expect to be there either. So we did have a fantastic author team that was able to write this so quickly. But I think that leads me to my next question. Which I know that you were you accepted so willingly and graciously, but I know that there was a point in time where you said, is the research there? Mm-hmm. You know, like, do we know what's best practice? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what kind of research you did and how you prepared to write, your parts of the book that were focused on the social and emotional.
Yeah. So this has been, I don't know about you all, because I'm sure there's parents on the call on this meeting, and I'm betting there's educators too. And it has felt to me as a parent, I've been a parent for 20 years. I've been a teacher or educator for 25. And I always feel like I have a pretty steep learning curve. It is nothing as a parent or as an educator, the learning curve that I have felt, that I have experienced over the last 9 months. I was saying to Jessica right before we left the green room and came in here that it almost feels like my learning curve sort of went like that, like fell onto itself. So, I always, with all of the work I do, everything I've always done is I always go to young people to help me edit the content of the work. And this, of course, was no different. And I think it's that much more important because it is always true, but it really is there's a couple of things that this experience of the last 10 months should make very, very, very clear to everybody. One is that young people have always been the subject matter experts of their lives about what it's like to receive the education that they are receiving. I know a lot about education. My co-authors know a lot. We see young people over generations. We have a lot of wisdom about that. Parents have a lot of wisdom. Teachers have a lot of wisdom. But young people are the experts of what it's like to receive education right now. And that is especially true about distance learning. So we have all learned a tremendous amount since August about what this was going to be like. We started in March, but I think we were it was hard to keep. It was oh, this is sort of like a thing we're doing, but we didn't think it was going to last for that long. Right. A lot of the kids I talked to said that. But really what I did was I went to young people and I said, you need to tell me what to do. You need to tell me what to write. You need to tell me what you think is the most important for parents and for teachers to know about what it's like for you going into distance learning. And what I can say now, actually, now that we're in January as well, just to put a highlight on two things, is that one of the things that I think is incredibly important in this book is what the last section about mindsets. And John Hattie wrote about mindsets and about how important it is for young people to have an understanding of how they're working and stretching themselves, and do they understand the information that's coming at them to the point that they can ask questions. Those mindset things are so important regardless of distance learning or not. And then the other part is that being able to emotionally regulate yourself and socially regulate yourself, self-manage yourself as we go through this process. Those skills are not soft skills. They're the most difficult, complex, essential skills that everybody needs to know. And they don't need to be in some kind of like presentation assembly thing. They never have been. They have to be, like, I hope one of the lessons we learn from this situation is that these are integrated into everything we do, because it doesn't matter what subject matter we're learning. It's about how we learn and how we process and how we regulate ourselves that enables us to really become educated, critical thinkers.
So self-regulation, a lot of people talk about that. Teachers talk about it, leaders talk about it, parents talk about it. Self-regulation obviously is critical. It's really difficult to be successful in an academic setting, whether it's preschool, or high school, without those skills. If you could provide, like a couple bits of advice for parents about how to help their kids with self-regulation when they are at home in this kind of crazy scenario that no one anticipated. Are there a couple of pieces of advice you could provide around that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and things that I have followed myself too. I think the most important thing is that emotions are real. Nobody has the right to tell you that you're not feeling, like, oh, you're overreacting or whatever. Emotions are real, but emotions do not have to be permanent. They're not permanent. You can actually transition an emotion into something else. And I think I've said that to myself. I mean, I've lost count of the times that I've said that to myself when I have been like, oh my gosh, like, what is going on now? Like, definitely in the last week, where it's like, I just remember emotions are real. And if we can process them, if we can own them and process them and be really like, how does this feel in my body? And then all of this processing does is it enables us to be, to reduce our anxiety and have a better idea of how to describe our emotions. And so one of the most important things I think adults can do that then models for young people, I'll give you an example that I hope is relevant to you all, which is, if you are feeling, or your child is feeling like, I'm so stressed. If you feel this and you're like, I'm so stressed, or I'm so exhausted, or I'm so scared, but like, just take the I'm so stressed. What's really important is to get very granular about those emotions so that you are saying, okay, wait, there's a lot there. What does really I'm so stressed mean? And so I would suggest that you literally, like, if it's for you, like take a pad of paper and write down, don't do it on your phone, and write down, I'm so stressed. And then write underneath it all of the feelings that actually are more granular, more specific, that really are, you're unpacking what you really mean by I'm so stressed. And you can do that with your child. You can sit down with your child, especially if they're younger than like 7th grade. Because I would give them more space to be able to do it when they're older, alone, away from you. Is that just to unpack what those feelings are, because the more you have words to describe your feelings, again, the more emotional intelligence you create, and your anxiety goes down. And as a parent, if you're trying to figure out what the problem is that your child is experiencing, the more granular they can get, the better they're going to be able to describe to you exactly what the problem is. So for me, as a teacher and as a parent and as a human being right now myself, those things are the most important as far as my own like teaching of like what is important for social regulation, emotional regulation of myself and my kids.
Yeah. So this is a question I hadn't sent to you, but as you were talking, it's going to be, I'm going to throw it at you because I know you've written about both girls and boys. I have only boys and you have only boys at home, but I know that I have a lot of friends who have girls and boys, and they're saying it's different for them, this situation of being outside of school and not having access to their friends. Is there anything that you can tell us about the difference between maybe how you would handle some of these social, maybe, or emotional issues with boys versus girls?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that the emotional granularity thing I talked about is important no matter what. It's basically, especially for those of you who have younger children, like you're getting the bad feelings or the messy feelings in their stomach, and you're bringing them out so that they can take the physical feelings that they're having and make it make sense for them. And then the more they can make sense of it for them, then they can make sense of it to other people. So it's just a little caveat, not a caveat, but just like give you another example of that is that in lower school, elementary school and middle school, when kids get into conflict and they tell their parents and then they sometimes will have to go tell another adult, it's really common for both boys and girls to say, in the moment of like the meeting, for example, like what happened, and they say, I don't remember. Well, they don't remember is actually it's a complex response to I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so again, like if you can describe it, the better off your child's going to be. What I see, first of all, I think that it's most important, obviously, to focus on like what kind of kid you have. What I see, and just anecdotally, what I see is the ways in which boys and girls are wanting to maintain friendships. So and again, like your daughter or your son could be different, right? So what I'm seeing just in general is that boys are not as much preferring to do FaceTime one-on-one. Like I've seen girls in upper elementary school, middle school, and some high school who like want to do like, like they're doing virtual parallel watching of movies or parallel, doing sleepovers and things like that, where they're using FaceTime as a way to do basically parallel play. And I'm seeing girls who want to do FaceTime with like their camp friends, and then they're talking for long amounts of time to like one or two people. I'm not seeing as many boys do that as girls. However, I think it's incredibly important for boys and girls to maintain social connection with people that are important to them. So like boys I would definitely be structuring, and I would be encouraging, even if they're older, maintaining relationships with grandma and grandpa and your aunts, your sisters and your brothers, their aunts and uncles, just on a regular, consistent basis, because connection is so important to them, both boys and girls. With boys in general, I'm seeing that what they've reported to me is that they don't like feeling forced to be in social situations. So they would prefer, for example, to be in group video games, like where they're playing and they're talking to their friends and they're doing something and they're bonding and connecting while they're playing those games, or over their group chats, although they don't really have that much to talk about in their group chats anymore. And one of the things they've told me is that boys and girls is that there's no gossip anymore because nobody's really doing that much anymore. That might be a little different soon with hybrid learning. But so I think that's what I'm seeing. And I would also say is what I've heard from boys is that it's really important that if you are connecting in a different way than your son is, say like you like FaceTime and you think that that's something that your son should be doing and like having like deep, meaningful conversations with people like that you just actually need to look at what's comfortable for your child and honor that and how they're maintaining the friendships, not necessarily how you would most comfortably do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I think those of us who have had a glimpse at our kids, screens during a lesson, it feels as though the girls are on screen a lot more. The boys are like off screen. And I'm not sure why that is, but I think you just you kind of told me why. Boys are maybe perhaps not as into the face-to-face. They'd rather kind of listen in and then come in when they want to. And I guess we have to respect that and encourage maybe the more personal relationships. Don't make them go in on a class, but have them, continue to feel comfortable with that kind of, one-on-one.
Yeah. I've also heard boys say that they, like having like the 3 or 5 minutes in between classes where they can talk to their friends is better, that they'll do that. But you really need to look at how your child wants to connect and then honor that. And then within that, of course, we can create rituals and rhythms and structure and all of that. But don't force them to define how they want to maintain their friendships the way that you would want to, because it's really, it is their friendships and they know better about what feels more comfortable for them. So that, that's an important thing to remember.
That's a parenting, right? goes way beyond distance learning. Like, yeah, just because we feel one way doesn't mean they do at all, you know? So
Oh yeah. I could get one of my children to come in here right now and tell you about the struggles we've had.
Yeah, I could too. Save that for another time.
Right.
So what do you think, this is just your opinion, as you were thinking about the book, writing the book, what do you think the biggest impact of distance learning has been on maybe the way we think about schooling and kids learning?
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple things. One is I think right now we're in a situation where everybody's just trying to get through their day. I'm super impressed about you people showing up for this because I mean, it really, I'm just getting, and I understand why, from teachers, superintendents, school council, school board members, like all of this kind of stuff. And also because sometimes we have pretty contentious experiences and interactions with those people. And I can't help but say, because there's a principle that we have at Cultures of Dignity, which is be easy on people and hard on ideas. We live in a culture that is usually hard on people and easy on ideas. And this is such a good example because I've seen well-meaning parents get so angry at teachers and superintendents and school council people. Yeah. And it gets to be such a quagmire. And what we really need to be doing is focusing on like the problem. And I know people have very strong opinions about like, should my kid be should they be going to school, hybrid, in person, whatever. All I'm saying is like, we need to really stop the language that we easily use, of course, on social media, of like things like, that person should be ashamed of themselves, talking about a superintendent or a teacher or something like that. You know, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe I've had really frustrating experiences with teachers in my own children's, in my younger child's classes. But to say things like that, they should be ashamed of themselves, like shaming the whole person because of the things that they're doing to try and figure out how to keep all of our kids and teachers safe, where so many teachers don't want to come to school and they're balancing all different kinds of people's agendas. We've really got to tone that down, like actually not tone it down. We have to stop and we have to focus on being really rigorous on the ideas and really easy on people. Now I can't even remember, Jessica, what you told me, what you asked me. What were you asking me? Because I went on that tirade. I'm so sorry. What did you ask me?
I think what I asked you was like, what's been the biggest impact, you know, of distance learning?
Right. So people not right. So right. Well, that's one of them. And then I knew there was some kind of bridge to where I got to. But so what I would say specifically is that the way in which we define engagement has totally changed.
Yes.
So when I was starting to teach, getting ready for all the professional developments that we were doing in August, I defined engagement pretty much the way everybody else was defining engagement, which was we knew that we had to be give flexibility to young people and students for equity issues about like, should they have the cameras on or not because of backgrounds and, you know, would they be at home, you know, where would they be at home? And now, of course, we can have the fuzzy background. So that's sort of out the window. That doesn't really matter that much. But there was good reason for saying to young people, you don't have to have your cameras on. And at the same time, teachers who are desperate for interaction with their students, by the way, and miss school terribly, really do define engagement as having this one-on-one kind of person is like engaged on camera with you. And what we know, especially in older elementary to middle school, like what I really know now, which is not a huge surprise, but I've now seen it in their own words, is how self-conscious that age range is to be on camera all the time. And they don't want to be on camera all the time. And they're feeling like, oh, I look so ugly today, or someone's going to say something mean in the group chat about me, or I just woke up because I don't know why I didn't sleep well last night. My hair, you know, whatever, all the things. All these kids are feeling so self-conscious. And so I would say to you, I really believe all I do now in my professional development is most of what I do is talk about how we redefine engagement with young people, right? Because they're the subject matter experts. So of their lives and going through distance learning. So what I would do if I was a parent and your kid did not want to be on camera, but it also enables them sometimes to disengage, is come up with a criteria for when your child wants to engage using the camera and when they don't. And then come up with, well, what are you going to do if you decide not to be on camera? then what can you do to maintain engagement so that you're getting something out of the class? So give them that space to be, awkward and self-conscious and whatever. And at the same time, bring them into their own distance learning, into owning their own distance learning, so that they're coming up with, well, how do I want to participate if I don't want to be on camera? That is pretty much, for me, one of the biggest things that we've had to adjust to and just completely rethink. And I hope we carry that with us when we go back to school in a more normal way.
So I'm wondering, what can parents do for children who, I've had this experience where my kids don't want to interact directly with the teacher. Like, they feel like they might not want to be on camera, but they don't want to reach out to the teacher to say that. And the parent is saying, you need to reach out to the teacher directly. I think there are some kids who have no problem doing that, and then some who feel very reticent to do that. And it's probably a skill, that they need to be taught. How can maybe the parent can coach them? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that kind of?
Yeah, sure. So we know that most kids don't want to talk to their teachers about problems that they might be having. There's a lot of reasons why. In March, when I was doing focus groups with kids, and they were advising me on what distance learning was like for them, many of them said they didn't want to talk to their teachers about problems they were having, because they didn't want to make their teacher's life worse, because they could see now what their teacher was dealing with, right? Like young kids and all sorts of stuff. And they're like, I don't want to make my teacher's life worse, so I'll just deal myself. And then you're dealing with all different kinds of platforms. I don't know about people watching us, but those platforms, as a parent, have been very challenging for me not to sometimes take the laptop and throw it against the wall. It's not the laptop's fault, but I'm sure Schoology people are doing their best, and Infant Campus and like all those people. But honestly, it's like, one day the password works and one day it doesn't work. And one day your kid actually puts up the assignment and it gets registered by the teacher. And the next, the teacher can't find it. I had a teacher once say to me about a month ago that everything, it's not like I believe her. She said that every note, everything that she had done for my child in the class, every note, every grade, every comment, whatever, disappeared. She couldn't find it. She had nothing about my child ever taking this class, and she had been taking notes the whole time. So I think if we go back to emotional regulation, okay, I'm really, really frustrated, like at Schoology right now. This emotion is going to pass. I'm going to not hate Schoology for the rest of my life. Anyway. But it will pass. This situation will pass. And then the next thing is, these social emotional skills are lifelong skills. And one of the things which has always blown my mind about teaching and what we don't do in schools is that as a thing, distance learning or not, a teacher should start off the year with something like, hey, we're going to have a great school year, but I might do things or grade paper or do something that really aggravates you and really gets you upset, or like something will happen on Infinite Campus or whatever, and it's going to get really, I won't mark a grade or you won't see it or whatever, and you might get really upset with me. If you get upset with me, here's how I want you to talk. Here's how I want you to conduct. Here's how I want you to do it, right? Here's how I want you to communicate with me. And then they can come up with a protocol. They could even do it with the kids to come up with like mutually agreed upon protocols. Right now, just to say that if your child, what I would do with your child in answer to the question is, if they are very against reaching out to the teacher, what I say to my students and my own children is, okay, what would happen that you, like, what's the bar that you would then reach, that you think you need to reach out to the teacher? So have them articulate it. And then also, no matter what I would do is have them draft an email that says like, and that no pressure on doing it, right? It's like you just draft it. So you just have it prepared. And you can, you can email it to the parent and put draft in it, which is another really important professional skill to learn is, you have a draft of a difficult email, send it to someone else to get their feedback. It's a great skill. So you put draft and the kid writes like, Dear Ms. Wiseman, I noticed that X is not happening in class, or I'm not, and say what the problem is, say what you want, and then say, thank you so much for listening to me. When is a good time to talk about this? These are all incredibly important skills because the feedback I'm getting is that on both sides, sometimes teachers and students will send each other very curt emails, and the other person gets really annoyed by that. And it just sort of escalates the frustration and irritation and sort of short fuse that everybody has right now. So this is a way also of teaching your child's social skills that are really important for their professional lives, the rest of their life. And it actually also shows your child that, like, you know how to handle these things. So you're role modeling and showing that you know what you're doing. You're like a competent human being, which as they get older, of course, gets harder to do. So it's a win-win sort of in all of these ways.
Yeah. And I think what you've said implicitly in what you said is that once they do it, they will get a response, and it's probably going to make them feel very good because they've made that connection and they've gotten a response. And now, I mean, so it's almost developing a sense of confidence in themselves. Small steps.
Competence and confidence. Yeah. That's a big deal for, it's a big deal for any age to be able to do that, because the power dynamics feel like teachers here and the child's here. And, I don't like to, I feel like I have to be honest about like how difficult things can be. Most teachers are doing really, they're doing their best and they're putting their best foot forward and all of that. And it could be that you have a teacher who's not doing that, who for various reasons is just not handling the situation well. And so if your child sends a professional, polite email and you get something rude back, if you do need to escalate it to a situation, then you've got a record of how your child handled the situation. And I think that's important.
Yes. And again, that's a good skill for them to learn to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. So the next question, I don't know, might be a little difficult to answer, but it's a 3-parter. Well, it's not a 3-parter, but 3 things I was going to say, just based on, there are so many strategies in the book for parents, 100 at least. But if you wanted to say, what are 3 things that right now parents could do to set their kids up for success, mm-hmm. what would you prioritize? Knowing that they've been doing this now, I guess, for a few months.
Forever. They've been doing it forever.
In their lives forever. In my life, forever. Yeah, seems like that.
Yeah, I think right now this is a good chance to do a reboot on. We went into some detail about structures and routines, and I think that it's not just about New Year's resolutions. It's about, this is a new semester, and I think it's always good for teachers to reevaluate and redo with their students, for example, their classroom expectations and guidelines together. Likewise, I think it's a really important time to reboot the routine that you all have established. And because, things got a little looser, it's the holidays and you just don't, you might have had a better, cleaner, more, a healthier routine beforehand. But we went into some amount of detail in this book about how to have a healthy routine for your child. The way that I see it, as far as routines go, is that you need a place to be peaceful and process like your day and get ready for your day in the very beginning of the day and the very end of your day. And by everything I'm about to say is also the same for your children. So I'm not saying you got to go and do an hour-long meditation or like an hour, like I live in Boulder, right? So I don't know if anyone's from Boulder here, but there are people in Boulder who, there probably is one right now, who's like outside and it's freezing outside and they're like running, right? With like bricks in their backpack. It's just ridiculous. This is the kind of place I live. There are people who do that. That is not me. They feel that's great if you do that. It's not me. But that's the way they process. You don't have to do that. Like, we don't have to strive for greatness. We can just strive for mediocrity of like 3 minutes of like starting the day with like a 2-minute meditation. Or just sitting quietly with a cup of tea. Get for your child a cup of like hot cocoa and just be quiet and just like what the day, and just sit and breathe for a minute, just for a minute. And then at the end of the day, you also want that, which means that nobody, I'm getting a little bit into social media, but nobody, your child, nobody should be on screens an hour before they go to bed. It's so important. And then in the middle of the day, or the day, the day is a time of like, can you during the day find a way to feel like you're contributing to something that's bigger than yourself? Can you find maybe something that you're curious about and that you want to find out more about, or that you want to get better at? Do you want to have the third thing is you want to have meaningful social connection. And then you have this place to process and find peace, sort of bookending your day. You don't have to do all three things every day. This is not like we're doing a Pinterest thing of like our days. It is, let's try and strive for some of that during our day. And then that's sort of the overall kind of way of thinking about routine. And then if you think about your child being in school, and we go into this in the book about like 4 or 5 hours a day. And then the routine of the things that they have in the middle. So even if they have 5 minutes, and they obviously should be drinking water, I don't know why. I hope schools are giving your kids bigger breaks than that, so they can, walk and get around and open the door and be like, oh, the sky. And then we need about 90 minutes to 2 hours for meaningful social connection or doing things that are creative for them. And then it would be like really cool to include things like drawing or reading a book, which I know I've got, that's easier said than done, say it that way. But I think if we structure our day of like, you've got 90 minutes that you can use social media or technology, maybe after school to maintain connections and be creative, and then 90 minutes to 2 hours where you're doing something where you're exercising and taking care of yourself without your eyeballs on the screen, then that's a sort of healthy overall structure that we put a lot of effort into in various ways in the book.
Yeah, I think that there have been good things that have been created that we've learned, but I think you're right that the screen time, which we know the American Academy of Pediatrics and many, they've said stop the screen time years ago, and yet now our kids are spending, 8, 9, all day on screens. So I think that you're right, taking those breaks, learning to connect. I mean, it has been interesting that kids are connecting with one another face to face on screen, whereas before maybe they were texting. So that has been sort of an advantage. But yeah, it's overwhelming for them, especially the little ones, to be on screen for hours a day. So I think those breaks, that's great. I think that's really important. And it's I think parents need to kind of maybe make sure that they're building that into the day.
Absolutely. For us as well as them.
For us, yes, exactly. So that kind of leads me into another thought, which is considering the last almost year where this has been happening, distance learning has been happening. What do you think that we've learned that might impact our schools going forward?
Well, I think it's going to be
solve all of our problems.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see kids saying like, they're going to be so desperate to get back. Most of them are going to be so desperate to get back to school that maybe this will go back to quote unquote normal. But I think that young people are going to have a very different set of expectations about like, well, why should I want to interact with school in X way. Why can't I? Because I've learned how to online learning. I've learned how to be online. So are we going to actually like punish them when they come, if they come back into school in, in-person learning, but they want to do it in a hybrid way or a different kind of way. And our response is like, no, you have to be in school in person. Well, they've learned a tremendous amount. Are we really going to say to students, it's possible for us to do this because we do it in other ways. And I would hate that would be the case. But if we say to them, all this stuff that you learned during this horrible year that we asked you to like get your grit together and like be like super strong and all this stuff. And, we're going to tell you that actually you don't need to take the stuff that you learned during this incredibly difficult year and you can't apply it for the rest of your education. I think that would be hypocritical. And if I was a kid, I would be enraged. If that was the case, if I wasn't listened to that way. So I think that's an important part of this. I think parent engagement, I hope, is going to change for the better, because as someone who does a lot of parent things, I'm lucky enough, in the area where Barbara's is located, and there's many towns, that are on the chat, where like I'll go somewhere and there'll be a lot of people who come to my parent presentations, which is wonderful. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. And that's not really usually the case, right? You usually get like 10 people to come to these parent things. And so I hope that this will give us more latitude in being able to have more diverse and robust kinds of parent education. I'm hopeful about that. So yeah, that's the, I just hope, and I'm working hard to make this happen. My contribution to this is that when young people come back into school, or we are really able to iterate on what do we want school to look like, that we listen to young people and we give them a voice at the table, not like in a focus group and then that's it, and not like in some kind of affiliation group. Like I'm talking like a seat at the table. It doesn't mean that whatever they want goes, because that's the way I think the more we understand that we live in a community and we don't get everything we want is incredibly important, but they do get a voice. And I want them to be at the table in all different kinds of ways. So I'm working with schools a lot on being able to do that to the ability that they can right now.
Any tips for parents trying to advocate for some changes, maybe more, whether that's more flexibility? I know there are, I've heard from parents who feel as though their kids are actually doing better at home because there's less social anxiety. Some of our kids with IEPs are actually, they're missing their teachers, but they don't feel as anxious now that they don't have to deal with the school bus and the, lunch, which is we all know can be very, very difficult. Any tips for parents who want to advocate for some changes for their kids?
Yeah, see, I think that's a really good example, because I think that like if we listen to what works, I mean, I work in all different kinds of schools, like huge schools, small schools, middle-sized schools. And, there's real issues about, for example, if you're at a school that's got like, 2,500 kids in it and you've got to feed them. So lunch is 4 periods of 23 minutes apiece, and it has to start at 10 a.m. in order for the last group to be able to have lunch at 1. There are real constraints about working in schools, and those are real, and they cannot operate with the focus of a population of 1. Right, of like your child, and you might have and that's unfortunate, and it can be very frustrating and very aggravating, and they even under the best of circumstances. And if you have a child who has an IEP or is enjoying and thinking that this is better for their learning, I think that they should be able, however they feel most comfortable, be able to write down or communicate why. And to advocate for themselves, and now that they've had this year, that they can see and figure out, well, what works for me and what doesn't work for me, and then be able to chart that, again, however is best suited for your child, and then to be able to bring that to the school and say, okay, well, we'll try not to have that tone in your voice that I just had, but what can we do so that my child can engage in the learning at the school in the most productive way? What can we do? How can we work together? My child has prepared this, these observations about what has worked for them while we were distance learning, and then you take that as part of their IEP. And again, that goes back to, wow, I really hope that schools are able to see the wisdom of being flexible, and that they don't allow the constraints of the system to do what's best for the child.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that flexible piece is critical, because I think we have seen some inflexibility in schooling in the past. And if nothing else, this has shown us, what magic teachers can produce with just with almost nothing. I mean, it's really been quite amazing to see what they've been able to do.
Yeah.
And how passionate they are for their students. I think,
I miss them. I mean, when I know the first time I walk into a school, I'm going to bawl. I know because I love school, and I love seeing all of them, all the little people together, and it makes me incredibly happy. I know I will be crying all next year. So
it's not going to get old. I think we've all, what we used to take for granted
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So I think last question for you, and I have to look at my ask a question button after this, but so tell us about any kind of feedback you've gotten from parents or students or teachers who have taken a look at the book, and how has it helped them, and what have they taken away?
Well, I have to say, like when I talk to parents, I've been in my PDs, sometimes like teachers will grab it and show it to me on screen, and I'm like, oh my God. Because it makes me feel so good that we were able to do something that was helpful. So, I mean, that's what that's like the biggest compliment of somebody who's trying to help people. And they're like, yeah, this is helping me. I think that what I have gotten feedback about is how helpful it is to decrease anxiety. And that, it's painful to listen to, parents feeling like they have to be their children's teachers, which you don't have. You're their teacher throughout their life, right? Like, think about how many times you're going to tell your child to like fill the dishwasher or empty the dishwasher, which I should I'm going to put on right after this. It's going to be like 10,000 times, right? You're going to do that over the course of your child living at your home. But you're not your child. You don't have to be your child's teacher. And that's one of the things we're really saying is like, you are in partnership with teachers. You don't have to be their child's teacher, your child's teacher. So you're like hovering over them. Actually the research shows that if you hover over your child as the child's on their laptop trying to do their homework, your anxiety may decrease, but their anxiety increases. Yep. So what we heard is that by using this is that people's anxiety decreases because it doesn't feel so overwhelming, like you have to do everything. It's like, oh, here's what I can do, or here's an activity I can do, or here's one of the things I love that Doug and Nancy did is they love these grids where you can just sort of fill out when you're like in a difficult situation where you can fill out the question prompts, and you sort of, it's like a puzzle, and you're like, you sort of fill it out, and at the end of it, you're like, oh, this is what I do. So that's one of my favorite things.
Awesome. Okay, so we have one question from Tracy.
Okay.
She asks, can you say more about the relationship between teachers and parents, caregivers in this environment? You mentioned the stress and how it has changed the relationship and the ways of communicating. As an elementary school principal, I worry about how this situation might harm relationships far into the future. Oh my gosh, yeah.
I didn't mean to laugh. I do not mean to laugh. That was a laugh of relating and having spent a lot of time. I do a lot of work with K-8 principals. So, okay, this is a hard one for me because I've experienced it both ways. I've experienced it with all the PD that I've done with teachers who are trying their best and are exhausted. And in elementary school, for example, they're doing their best. Can you imagine? Just imagine for a second, like being a teacher of a group of second graders doing virtual classes all day. Herding cats is like easy compared to that. And I have seen amazing, like Jessica, you were saying, like amazing mindfulness exercises that 7-year-olds, 6-year-olds will do. But just like, think about it. I had a whole PD on, was it possible to put first graders in breakout rooms? Like, what could you possibly do with them? We had a whole thing about it, which, by the way, we decided you really can't do an assignment. You can give them a question prompt that brings their relationship closer, by the way. That was what we sort of assessed. So what we know from elementary school is that there's a tendency, which makes perfect sense, for the kids to get distracted, or if they're upset about something that's happening in the class or they're frustrated, they go get the parent. And then the parent gets frustrated for various reasons that seem very understandable to the parent, and then they come in. That's and a parent like comes by in where the child's learning and hears the teacher and gets really upset, or like, what are they doing, or questions the teacher. So what I would do if I were you, principal who's asking, Tracy who's asking this question, is this is all to me about principles. Meaning principles are things that guide our decisions and our actions. So a principle I talked about earlier was be easy on people, hard on ideas. And so the rules, is you're in a position of leadership, the rules that I think it's going to be really important when we start as soon as we can is to revamp and reestablish together group expectations for teachers and parents about how we're going to communicate with each other, which means we acknowledge another principle could be conflict is inevitable, collaboration is essential. And so we can acknowledge, like, we've gone through a really hard time. We had moments where we didn't get along. So just acknowledge it. But in order for us to be able to help our kids, we have to collaborate. So let's think about a set of principles that will guide our decisions and our actions, and the rules that we make or the guidelines that we make from that are all coming from those principles. So rules only work if they're coming from principles that people have agreed on. They don't necessarily have to like say, yes, 100%, like I agree everything, but like these are our principles, different from mission, different from vision. And so if it guides our decisions and it guides our actions and we create rules based on that and expectations of how we treat each other, then I think we'll be okay, because people can keep going back to those principles, right? Because there's no way to be able to control every or expect or anticipate every situation that comes your way as the principle. But if you have principles that guide actions, then they can apply it. Your teachers and parents can apply it together as things come up. So that is so much what I would encourage you to do. I don't see any other way through it but that.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, Rosalind, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your perspective. I think, I hope everybody will get the book, because this is like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that you can work through. You mentioned the tools, the rubrics, all sorts of great information, great scenarios, all grade levels. We really appreciate the hard work you put into this book. Thank you to Barbara's Bookstore again for hosting us. It's a fantastic bookstore. They do a lot of great interviews with authors. So, please check back in with them, follow them. I think all of their stuff is posted on YouTube, so you can find just about everything there. So thank you again, Rosalind. Good luck to all the parents out there and the teachers that might be joining us. There's a silver lining. I think we've learned a lot about what kids need and how to support them. And we hope you'll reach out to Corbin if you have any ideas about, things we can do to help support our kids. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Jessica. I wish you would come with me to other things I do.
Anytime. I'm just looking forward to being able to, I remember seeing you in Florida when we were in Florida at a conference, and we were sitting on the water and having a glass of wine, and I hope we can get there again, right?
Oh, you're so right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I wish that for everybody.
For everybody. There is, it's going to be there. Just everybody hang in there and do your best. Yeah. And we appreciate you all. So thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Barbara's. See you later.
Bye, everybody.